welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading this Twitter post from Alexander Dugin and providing commentary because he's a major political theorist in Russia, and I think he's been very prophetic on a number of accounts, and I think he is very wise, primarily because he agrees with me quite frequently, and I am very wise, obviously. So this post starts off with, by the end of the year, this time in Latin America, a new syndrome of multipolarity emerged. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro declared his country's claims to the territory of British Guyana. Maxim Medvedevov, in his Telegram channel Notes of a Traditionalist, rightly points out that Guyana itself was a product of the evil genius of Atlanticism. Lord Palmerston, who planned and implemented the dissection of Great Colombia into pieces with the death of Bolivar, including the snipping off of Essequibo to British Guyana Essequibo, along with the Malvinas, is another front of multipolarity against unipolarity. So I've talked about this before, which is that even before this current Venezuelan conflict arose, I said that it's very likely another front for unipolarity versus multipolarity was going to open up in Latin America. I had no idea how it was going to open up, but I knew it was going to happen in one way, shape, or form because it's happening everywhere else. And so Alexander Dugin apparently agrees with me here. So he starts off talking about how Russia is fighting with the collective West and American, which he calls Anglo-Saxon globalism. I would call it Zionist globalism. And this is happening in Ukraine. So he considers it a civil war of Russians because they consider Russians and Ukrainians to be of one people. And he says it's a civil war, imperial Russians against Atlanticist Russians who have betrayed their Russian identity. Atlanticist Russians are used by the unipolar forces of the West. And that's the thing that I really don't understand about the Ukrainians because they were overthrown. Their democratically elected government was overthrown in Maidan. And we know it was Western snipers that were shooting at protesters in place now. It's definitive fact. It was found in court of laws. It was talked about in recorded conversations amongst EU officials. They've pretty much admitted at this point that they did make sure that Ukraine was pivoting towards the West and not neutral like Russia wanted it to be. And so what I don't get is polls do show a ton of Ukrainians are very hostile towards Russia. And I don't understand that hostility. Why would you choose the West over Russia? Because if you look at just objective numbers, the quantifiable facts on the ground, after 2014, Ukraine had lower money. They had fewer dollars. I shouldn't say dollars. They had a worse economy. People were just worse off once they pivoted towards the West. So betraying the Russians did not benefit Ukraine. In fact, I challenge people, and I've challenged people before, to find me countries in modern times of the last 10, 20 years that have benefited from siding with the United States over siding against the United States or just staying neutral. No one has really benefited from taking the side of the United States. And so Ukraine here, they had worse living conditions after siding with the Americans, and then they decided to go to war with the Russians, and they lost their entire male population of fighting age. The average age of a military conscript now in Ukraine is over 40 years old. This is information given to us by Ukraine, okay? Like, that's horrific that all these young people were just wiped out for the sake of America, and it didn't benefit the Ukrainians at all. So I do not get all these Ukrainians who are very anti-Russian and very pro-Western because it's destroyed your country. Like, Ukraine is not going to exist after this in any way that is representative of what it used to be. Like, Ukraine had so much going for it before it pivoted towards the West, and then it was over for Ukraine. But anyways, let's move on. So that was one aspect of unipolarity versus multipolarity. The next one is the Islamic world, which is consolidating with serious delay against Israel. It's taking a long time for them to consolidate against Israel, but we do see countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia repairing relationships in order to fight against Israel. And some countries are dragging their feet a little bit more because their governments are controlled by the West, controlled by the Zionist forces. However, because Israel is conducting a systematic genocide of the Arab population of Gaza, these other countries, especially their population, maybe not their leaders as much, their population is very upset about this. It's very much radicalized the Muslim youth of the world. And quite frankly, just seeing the atrocities being committed in Gaza, it's radicalized me to a very large extent, I would say. It's been horrific, tragic. I can't understand how countries have allowed this genocide to go on. It's made me, like, I knew I was very hostile towards the American government. I very much did not like the American government. I knew it was discriminating against people like me because it didn't like straight white Christian males anymore because of the Zionist control of the government. I knew all these things, but there was something about the Gaza conflict that made me recognize just like how true and just the cause is that I feel like I'm fighting for by making this content. And so, yeah, I can imagine how much it's radicalized the Arab youth, because it's certainly radicalized me to see just the heartbreaking scenes that are occurring in Gaza right now. But anyways, let's move on. So Israel is on the side of unipolarity. The Zionist oligarchs control the Western world, and it is a front for multipolarity to fight against unipolarity. And next we have another fight for multipolarity against unipolarity in Africa. And so there's a block of anti-colonial countries in West Africa: Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Central African Republic, Gabon, which is united against the pro-colonial Atlanticist regimes and globalist France under Macron. Here too, an open conflict could flare up at any moment. That's actually true. I completely forgot about that. We were expecting that these other countries in the region would attack the countries that had military coups, and it never ended up happening. I wonder why. I bet their militaries were not very in favor of it and would have had a coup of their own, and so they had to not push forward for their own sake. I bet the Western world, I bet the Atlanticist Alliance was definitely pushing for these countries to go to war, but they knew that their own militaries would coup them if it happens. So that's really interesting. But that's another front for this war going on. We have it across Europe, across Asia, across Africa, across Latin America. There is multiple theaters of war for unipolarity versus multipolarity. So next up, we have the potential front of Taiwan against continental China. And there's concerns the United States this concerns the United States the most, because it would be a direct conflict between China and the United States, because Taiwan definitely cannot hold its own against mainland China. And it concerns the United States, but I also think it's something the United States wants as soon as possible, because they can't win in the long term. The United States just has no cards for it. It has no hand that it's been dealt at this point. It is in terminal decline, and time is on China's side. And so now we have the current conflict that we're talking about, the most fresh conflict, which is the declaration of Venezuela's rights to Essequibo, an artificial colonial creation of the Atlanticists. The same goes for the Malvinas issue, which could become acute after the removal of the degenerate who came to power. This is what happens when revolutionary Peronism is crossed with liberalism, as done by the loser Sergio Massa. So here we see that Venezuela, a force of multipolarity, might be retaking some of its land from the unipolar construct of Guyana and getting back Essequibo. So what's the United States going to do in this regard? Because it needs the oil from Venezuela. It's been able to repair its relationship with Venezuela to some extent, enough to have a trade relationship, although I'm sure Venezuela just does not trust the United States after everything the United States has done. But, I mean, is the United States going to intervene to stop Guyana from being defeated? I don't think Guyana can hold its own against Venezuela. So this is just so, I mean, it's certainly tragic, all the conflicts going on, but it's also so interesting because we live in the most interesting times and also the most horrific times since World War II, because we are seeing the changing world order that I've been talking about for over a decade. You see people like Ray Dalio in his book, The Changing World Order. I'd also recommend watching his YouTube video on the Changing World Order. We see that happening right now. We're seeing a terminal decline of the hegemon of the world, the United States, and we're seeing the massive rise of China within our lifetimes, and we're seeing what this new world, this multipolar world, is going to look like. So anyways, that's what I'll leave you with. That's so interesting that This small post, I can come up with a 10-minute video on it. But anyways, hopefully this was insightful for you. Hopefully this helped in some way, shape, or form. If it did, please leave us a like. We do appreciate it. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble. Rumble is not syncing our videos like it's supposed to be doing, but we are concerned about the suppression that's obviously going on YouTube. So eventually, if we do get permanently banned, we will move over to Rumble. And tell a friend about our channel. We're trying to bring awareness to our channel as much as possible. We do have some ways of marketing, but we do appreciate any help you can give us. And leave us a comment in the comment section below. Questions, concerns, critiques. I love hearing from you. I do read all of it. And when necessary, I do try to respond. And thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.